Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy HP, and you're listening to the Unsportsmanlike Conduct podcast, a podcast for the average Joe covering football and everything New York Giants. The New York Giants just recently defeat the Washington Redskins in a Week 15 road matchup. The New York Giants won 2 straight games, being the Miami Dolphins last weekend and now being the Washington Redskins, going to 4-11, whereas the Washington Redskins have lost and now fall into 3-12. This was a pretty good game from an offensive perspective. I would have to say in the 2 years that Pat Shermer has been our head coach for the New York Giants and a play caller for the New York Giants, this is by far my favorite game where I've seen sort of Pat Shermer's usage of all of our weapons across from not only a wide receiver and tight end perspective, but also finding ways to get Saquon Barkley to muster some good offensive yardage production. There are almost no mistakes on any of the players from an offensive perspective. I thought Daniel Jones had plenty of time to throw the football. I don't even remember Daniel Jones getting hurried as much. I think Daniel Jones only got sacked one time. And I'll double-check the stats as we sort of walk through and analyze the offense, but just sort of speaking and spitballing here, I think Daniel Jones only got sacked about one time. Maybe he got pressured, maybe up to 5 times, but not too many times. There wasn't one throw all game that I saw Daniel Jones throw where it sort of, led me to scratch my head or ask myself, well, what was he doing with that throw? The offense looked fluid. A lot of good mixing and mixing up the plays, right? With pass plays and run plays, a lot of positive plays. We had so much success with the run game today, and it was very, it was interesting to see. It was refreshing to see because, Pat Shermer called a lot of plays, a lot of run plays in between the tackles, and Saquon Barkley had a field day. But prior to this game, every time we've seen Pat Shermer dial up plays for Saquon Barkley to run in between the tackles, we either get no gain, maybe a gain of 1 to 2, 3 yards, or a negative gain play. But today, Saquon Barkley was on. This whole offensive lineman, all the offensive linemen were on. I mean, it was just really, really great to see. And I think that was the expectation when Pat Shermer came in, is that this offense was going to be fluid, no hiccups, barely any mistakes, moving the ball sort of sideline to sideline. You see these receivers moving, east to west, getting first down after first down, having long drives, being able to match point for point, touchdown for touchdown, and we saw that in the Giants' first 3 drives. This was another game where the New York Giants pass defense struggled a lot. Dwayne Haskins, yes, he got injured, but Dwayne Haskins was looking good when he was in there. They scored those 2 really good drives. They scored 2 good touchdowns. And they did that successfully because Dwayne Haskins was on fire. He was finding guys open. He was finding Harmon open. He was finding Terry McLaurin open. We had no answer for them. Baker didn't have an answer for them. Corey Ballantyne didn't have an answer for them. But to match those touchdowns, to match those points and offensive output, you see Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley come back right on the field and match them point for point. And if I'm not mistaken, the New York Giants were the first team to actually stop the opposing team, to stop the Redskins from actually scoring points. Because remember, we ended up trading jabs, and it was 14-14. The Giants scored. We ended up going 21-14, and then the pursuing drive, the Washington Redskins get the ball, and with that drive finally stalled out, where it wasn't a field goal and it wasn't a touchdown. And, this episode, and I'm sort of just spitballing out here before I do go into my normal format, but it was just really, really good game to watch from an offense perspective. From a defense perspective, once again, it's sort of, we don't have enough talent. And I think because we don't have enough talent, we make every other opposing team's offense look better than they actually are. We gave up 35 points. The New York Giants did not turn the ball over. Right? So Daniel Jones didn't throw an interception. No one fumbled the football, or rather fumbled the football and give it away. So it's not like any of those points came off of turnovers or short yardage situations, because even when Rosas had missed the 53-yard field goal, we ended up getting a stop. The defense was able to stop the Redskins on the pursuing drive. 35 points, guys. We gave up 35 points. And I remember with one drive, the ball had started on the Washington's own 1-yard line. They went 99 yards to score a touchdown on us. This defense just doesn't have enough talent. And several weeks ago, I cut James Bettcher some slack, because James Bettcher can only do so much. You have young DBs. You have 3/5 of your secondary are rookies. We just lost Janoris Jenkins. Well, I wouldn't say lost, but we just cut him. And now DeAndre Baker is your number one cornerback. We still have issues at safety. We also, everyone knows we've lost Jabril Peppers for several weeks now. Antoine Bethea is our best safety out there. And he's always a casualty of a fucking touchdown. Excuse my language, but he's always a casualty of a touchdown. DeAndre Baker's getting better. The thing I like about DeAndre Baker, I know he's been getting burned all season, but he has shown sides of sort of tough coverage, stingy coverage. He's shown that over the last maybe 8 games or so. He's had a better second half of the season than he's had a first half. And even in the games where he did struggle, he also showed, a player here or there where he showed some pretty tight coverage. He's also shown instances where he gets a little too handsy and there ends up being a pass interference call. Which, I don't know, so some of the plays I've seen, even though there are pass interferences, I know he's giving up big plays, but he's shown signs of being a decent cornerback, and I think year 2, he'll get a little bit more better, but I think year 3, he finally comes into his own. So I sort of have a positive outlook on DeAndre Baker. I thought the pass rush was hot and cold throughout the whole game. It wasn't consistent enough. There were times where James Betcher had to dial up some blitzes to get to Haskins or get to Keenum. But it was pedestrian at best. But you know what, guys? I do want to go and follow the regular format of my episodes. If you're a current subscriber, a current fan who's been listening to my podcast since it's probably started or since the season started, you'll know that I usually like to break down the offense first and then break down the defense and sort of close out the episode that way. So again, let's start with the offense. Daniel Jones had a hell of a game. Nearly perfect. This is one of Daniel Jones' perfect, best games that I've ever seen him play. Daniel Jones looks so comfortable in the pocket. Looks like a pro. He doesn't look like a rookie. There wasn't a throw, and I said this earlier in the episode, there wasn't one throw that I looked at on the screen that made me scratch my head, made me sort of toss my phone in the air, made me throw the remote to the floor. Everything made sense. Daniel Jones is really comfortable, and what surprises me the most is how he's able to get the ball to guys that probably Eli Manning wouldn't have gotten the ball to. Guys like Cody Latimer. Every time Cody Latimer is in the game in place of someone who's been injured, and we've seen this all season, when Golden Tate was suspended, when Shepard was out with the concussion, and then today when Darius Slayton was out for most of the game due to a knee injury, he always finds Cody Latimer. Cody Latimer always ends up having good enough amount of receptions and yardage. He may not always get a touchdown, and granted he had a touchdown today, but Cody Latimer ends up being our number 1 possession receiver. We don't have Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram hasn't played since, God knows how long. I don't even remember the last game that he played for the New York Giants. He also killed my fantasy team, so trust me, I'm also, Evan Ingram being out for the New York Giants also hurts me from a fantasy football perspective as well. But Evan Ingram's out. Caden Smith, another rookie, he ends up making Caden Smith look good. He makes Caden Smith look so well, it leads me to sort of second guess whether we should even pick up the 5th-year option on Evan Ingram. Why spend all that money on a tight end when Caden Smith looks like he can do just pretty much almost give us the same type of production? Now, granted, I don't think Caden Smith is as athletic or as explosive as Evan Ingram is, but maybe we don't need to pay for overpay for a tight end because we already gave Sterling Shepard a $41 million contract. We already gave Golden Tate, an $80 million contract in free agency? So maybe why sign another wide receiver, essentially, when we have Caden Smith in his rookie year? In his rookie contract. Maybe we go save that money. It'll help us with respects to cap space. Maybe it'll also help us when we need to re-sign Barkley later down the road, because Barkley's going to be hitting year 3 next year. But that's how good Daniel Jones, I don't know, I feel like Daniel Jones kind of makes his other wide receivers look better and play better. I mean, even and I know I'm not even entirely sure if Benny Fowler's still on the team because I feel like he's been sort of on and off whether he gets cut or back to the practice squad. But even when Benny Fowler's is in the lineup and he's getting snaps, Benny Fowler ends up making some pretty big receptions and getting us some pretty big first downs. But today, Daniel Jones looked like a all-pro. He looked like your pro's pro quarterback, commanding the offense under center, and kudos and big and great. Sort of want to give a big hand to the offensive line because Daniel Jones, for most of the game, was standing tall and true. He was able to stand, and he was able to sort of shift around the pocket a little bit, even if you maybe he takes these. There were instances where I saw him take a 3-step drop. He wasn't too comfortable. Maybe I had to shift in and out a little bit in the pocket, but not too much. there wasn't always that much pressure on Daniel Jones either. Excuse me. Receivers were able to get open. Daniel Jones was given time to find his receivers and go through progressions. Daniel Jones finished with 5 passing touchdowns. Excuse me. Sorry, folks. I am coughing a little bit. I am a little under the weather. As I'm sure you're going through this episode, you're going to hear, you're probably going to hear some heavy breathing, some sniffling, and some coughing. I'm a little under the weather, so apologies for that. But look, Daniel Jones looked great out there. He was accurate. The ball looked great. He was zipping it. I mean, there were some throws where Daniel Jones knew, due to the zone coverages, my receiver's going to get hit the second the ball lands on the receiver's numbers. So you end up seeing him throw some heat. The ball comes out of Daniel Jones' hands pretty quickly, too. Daniel Jones has a pretty good release. I don't know. I mean, Daniel Jones just looked really, really good today. And I know that's the Washington Redskins, and they've only won 3 games. I know the Washington Redskins don't have a great pass defense. That's their Achilles heel of that defense. But it doesn't matter. He's a rookie quarterback playing against an NFL team. And the fact of the matter is, if Daniel Jones didn't play well against the Washington Redskins, then everyone would have been crucifying Daniel Jones. Everyone would have said Daniel Jones is not the answer. If Daniel Jones would have had a fumble, everyone would have kept saying, oh, well, Daniel Jones keeps fumbling the football. If Daniel Jones throws an interception, they would have said, oh, well, you might as well should have had Eli Manning play because Eli Manning had pretty good games over the last 2 weeks. Daniel Jones played flawless football. 28 of 42 for 352 yards and 5 touchdowns. 0 interceptions, and 0 times did he fumble the ball. The New York Giants did not turn over the ball at all this game, which was very, very refreshing to see. Everything was clicking. Everyone was firing on all cylinders. The receiving core, everyone in the receiving core was making a difference. And that's what it's all about. Golden Tate, 6 catches for 96 yards on 11 targets. Saquon Barkley, thank you, Pat Shurmur. I've been crying all my podcasts week in and week out on the simple fact that you have failed to put Saquon Barkley in space. You have failed to create plays to get Saquon Barkley the ball from a receiving aspect. But this week, this game against the Washington Redskins, Saquon Barkley gets 4 receptions for 90 yards, in which one of them was on a greatly designed screenplay where Saquon Barkley actually lined up far right as if he was going to do a go route or a deep post route. Sterling Shepard, 6 receptions for 76 yards on 6 targets. Cody Latimer, who stepped in for our rookie rising star Darius Slayton, ended up having 5 receptions for 44 yards on 7 targets. Caden Smith, who ended up with 2 touchdowns, one of which came in overtime to win and seal the game against the Redskins, for 35 yards on 8 targets. And this is the most important thing. It's not necessarily even about the receptions, but the fact that Daniel Jones was looking for everyone. Golden Tate had 11 targets. Shepard had 6. Latimer had 7. Caden Smith had 8. I mean, that is a great share of targets for your receiving group. Slayton had 2 before he got out. We played really well. Everyone was firing on the offense. Everyone was open in space. I mean, I was so happy to finally see Golden Tate, catching balls in the middle of the field. Same thing with Sterling Shepard. I mean, these guys were dissecting zone defenses. When they played soft coverage, these guys were open in the field. And even if they weren't big gains, they were smart plays. Daniel Jones was making the right throws. One of the big themes that I saw with the New York Giants, we weren't in 3rd and long situations. So many 3rd and medium to short situations. I even saw a couple of times where we were able to hand it off to Saquon Barkley to get first downs. And that leads to my next point. This offensive line played so well. Daniel Jones wasn't hurried. He didn't have to make bad throws. The offensive line allowed receivers to get open. And then lastly, the offensive line did so well that Saquon Barkley ran for 189 yards. Saquon Barkley had 22 carries. We don't see that a lot. We don't see Saquon Barkley even break the 20-carry mark, but he did. Saquon Barkley had 22 carries and 4 receptions. That means Saquon Barkley touched the ball 26 times. That is what he needs to be doing every single game. I have begged for Pat Shurmur to do this with Saquon Barkley since the season has started, because the poor utilage of Saquon Barkley has been sort of, I don't know how Pat Shurmur was able to get away with it for so long this season and even last season. Saquon Barkley broke 100 yards in the first half on 2 run plays. 2 big run plays. One of them was for 43 yards. That was a close touchdown. And the other one was a 67-yard touchdown. It was great offense to see. 8.6 yards per rush by Saquon Barkley. Usually when we have good rushing outputs, maybe a third of that comes from Daniel Jones. But Daniel Jones was a non-factor from a rushing standpoint. He only rushed for 3 times for 12 yards. Saquon Barkley is back, and Saquon Barkley is finally healthy. Everyone kept saying, that was sort of the big concern. Saquon Barkley was rushed back from a high ankle sprain. And he wasn't getting the offensive production the way people wanted him to. He finally had a good game against the Miami Dolphins last week, and then this week, he ends up having a career game. Ends up finishing with 2 touchdowns, 1 on the ground and 1 through the air. And a lot of that has to be a testament to sort of Pat Shurmur's play calling and in some of the schemes that he was running. Granted, again, I know that the Washington Redskins are a bad team. The touchdowns and the offensive output and success came against bad teams, but nevertheless, we scored 41 points. We did our jobs. You can't be mad at the New York Giants or New York Giants fans for being happy and excited about the fact that we actually did our jobs. We did what we were supposed to do. We shredded a poor secondary. Pat Shurmur has shown some life again late in the season for the second year in a row, where the team's able to string some games along and it looks like the offense is doing what it's supposed to do. It was the same way last week against a very tough and feisty Miami Dolphins team. Again, I know the Miami Dolphins are from a record perspective, are just as worse as the Washington Redskins, but they are a tough team. And we did really well against them as well. Saquon Barkley did as well. And we also got a good spread of offensive production from our receivers last weekend as well. So we are doing what we are supposed to. But it's very ironic, right? I mean, late in the season, once again, from back-to-back year, from head coach Pat Shurmur, the team is showing some life. But I think it's a little too late now. We know what we are with Pat Shurmur. Pat Shurmur, you can't just string along a couple of games late in the season and expect to last as the head coach of the New York Giants. I would still be very surprised if we keep Pat Shurmur after the end of this season. Like I've said this before, Mike McCarthy's on the market. Go after Mike McCarthy. Let him bring in his personnel. Let him make some personnel decisions and ownership within the personnel. I think that's what the New York Giants ownership needs to do, is to give the whole keys to the team from a staffing perspective, from a talent perspective, to the coaching staff. Let Mike McCarthy come in and run the ship. I think it's a little too late for Pat Shurmur. Obviously, look, it's a great when the New York Giants win on a Sunday. Even if this win was probably meaningless, even if this win hurts our chances to get a Chase Young or one of the more top defensive players. But look, nevertheless, we're going to have a top 5 pick once again. We'll be just fine. If we don't get Chase Young, which Chase Young has came out and said he's probably won't be entering the NFL draft. So let's say even if whether Chase Young's in the draft or not, we'll still be able to get top 5 talent because we'll have a top 5 pick. I think it's a little too late for Pat Shurmur, despite going on this 2-game winning streak. And who knows, maybe we beat Philly next weekend, because we were darn close in beating Philly a couple of weekends ago. Philly doesn't look that great of a team. Okay, so we have a fighter's chance against Philly, but we've also had a fighter's chance against every other team that we faced. We've been in so many tough matchups all year long, and we haven't been able to sort of make that one extra play and stop opposing teams from making 1 or 2 extra plays from beating us. And that's been the tale of the New York Giants with Pat Shurmur, with Ben McAdoo, and then even with Tom Coughlin. I know Tom Coughlin got us 2 Super Bowls, but in and out of those Super Bowls, that has been the story for the New York Giants. We're always in close games. And, at one point, the organization has to be tired of that and has to now decide and has to make a decision. Pat Shurmur is not going to be our guy. I mean, think about it. Even if we finish this season on a 3-game winning streak and we beat Philly next weekend, we'll finish the season 5-11. You know what was our record last season? It was 5-11. We are no better than we were last year. And that's a problem. That goes to coaching. And I want to talk about the defense. Again, it's not James Betcher's fault that we can't defend. At the end of the day, we don't have enough talent, and we have a lot of young talent that are going to continue to make mistakes. Some boneheaded pass interference calls. DeAndre Baker had a bad pass interference call. He was step for step for Terry McLaurin. I forgot which quarter it was. Step for step with Terry McLaurin, which I believe was also on a third down. It gets a little handsy, pass interference, automatic first down. On the Redskins' last drive to end the game, to tie the game, Corey Ballantyne on a boneheaded pass interference. A lob into the end zone. Case Keenum lobs it to the end zone. Instead of Corey Ballantyne tracking the ball with his eyes, he decides to shove the wide receiver. And the refs throw a penalty, throw a flag, pass interference. The Redskins are on the 1-yard line and they score a touchdown. We have young cornerbacks. And Corey Ballantyne hadn't gotten reps all year until maybe late into this season. DeAndre Baker, on the other hand, didn't get enough reps in the preseason and then ended up getting thrown into the regular season and had to face the likes of Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Adam Thielen, who else? Stephon Diggs. All these big money wide receivers. There's no way for DeAndre Baker to get his sort of feet under him. He was rusty throughout the whole season. Never got a. He may remember plays, but wasn't able to sort of get used to implementing those plays in the playbook by James Betcher because he never had enough reps in the preseason. He was injured all of preseason. I think he played a couple of snaps in the first game, and then after that, he didn't play. He wasn't able to play the rest of the preseason. This defense is inexperienced. We don't have Jabril Peppers, who I would say is the best and talented player on our secondary. We just cut Janoris Jenkins, who was our best cornerback. And he wasn't having the greatest season, but he was playing the best out of all of our DBs. Then we have a free safety in Antoine Bethea, who's the casualty of every single touchdown that we give up. He is probably the worst person I've seen in coverage at the safety position for the New York Giants. We don't have enough players. We don't have a commanding linebacker who's going to control games and lead the unit, lead the front seven. And we have a pedestrian pass rush. We had 11 quarterback hits for 3 sacks, which is okay. But what that also tells me is that we had 11 quarterback hits, and the Washington Redskins still scored 35 points. That means those 11 hits were not impactful. That means those 3 sacks weren't impactful. Because you're still giving up 35 points to Dwayne Haskins and Case Keenum, who both did not also turn over the ball. We didn't force any turnovers. This Redskins team isn't a good offense, but we made them look like one. Because I don't know if you remember, we were trading blows with the Washington Redskins. It was 14-14. Touchdown after touchdown, we were trading touchdowns. I mean, we did so bad that not only did we give up a career first reception to one of their Washington Redskins receivers, we also gave up a career first touchdown reception to one of their tight ends. Our coverage is just not good. And so I kind of had to take a step back and say, well, what is sort of the key thing that we need on our team? What do we need on our defense that's going to help take that defense to the next level? Now, everyone kept saying, the chase for Chase. The chase for Chase. Can we tank to get Chase? Chase Young, the D-end out of Ohio State. But maybe a good pass rusher isn't the answer yet. Maybe that doesn't completely fill and address all of our weaknesses if our secondary can't defend. Do you think Chase Young is going to get to the backfield every single down? He's not. You don't think NFL teams are going to figure out a way to prevent him from disrupting the quarterback every single play? Of course they are. That's how the NFL works. Good teams make adjustments. Sure, Chase Young will do great against bad teams, the way some of our other defensive players have been able to do well against bad teams. But when we face a good team, you don't think they'll find ways to take Chase Young out of the game, leaving our secondary susceptible to big plays once again? Receivers catching the ball open in space and getting yak after yak after yak? I'm going to be honest with you. There's weaknesses all over this defense. And Surprisingly, look, we did really well containing the run game, but the Washington Redskins don't have a good run game. So that wasn't a surprise to me. We stopped the Washington Redskins from running the ball well, and they still scored 35 points. They still were able to get first down after first down. Some of their touchdowns were long drives. Remember, one of their touchdowns came at the 1-yard line, starting from their opposing 1-yard line. And we gave up 99 yards, and they were able to march down the field against us and score. We need help at linebacker. We don't have a middle linebacker that's going to command the field. We don't have edge rushers or outside linebackers because since we have a 3-4 defense, we don't have an outside linebacker that can get to the backfield consistently or at the same time drop back in coverage. Now, Marcus Golden's having a great year for us. He's having from a statistical standpoint, I did not expect Marcus Golden to be our leading pass rusher. So kudos to him. And kudos to Lorenzo Carter for having a great game today. But Lorenzo Carter all year has been a no-show. We've gotten our pass rush all year has been pedestrian. But at the same time, we've gotten burned in the pass game. So what's the defensive position that's going to help address this team? Our defense lacks talent, and I don't think we address it this offseason. I don't think we turn it around this offseason. I think we get a little bit better. I think we make progress, but we certainly do not sort of make that big leap where defense is no longer a concern for us. Because we have issues on the defensive line, we have issues in that linebacker, and we have issues in the secondary. We need a safety, and we need another cornerback because we lost Janoris Jenkins. Julian Love will probably be our slot corner. Corey Ballantyne isn't looking good. Ever since Corey Ballantyne has gotten burned, he's getting burned. Okay, every time Corey Ballantyne is either causing a pass interference or giving up big plays or giving up first downs after first downs. He's another target for opposing team quarterbacks. DeAndre Baker, again, he's hot and cold. He is a rookie, so I can give him that. So hot and cold isn't so bad for a rookie DB. Because he's shown some signs where he's, tough coverage and making great plays. And then he's shown signs where, DeAndre, where the hell were you? And then in other instances, it's just DeAndre Baker gets, it's sort of he ends up being a casualty as a result of zone defense. Because Betcher ends up running these zone schemes where at the same time we're unable to get to the opposing team quarterback. Which is another thing that's sort of my gripe with James Betcher is, you can't continue to run zone schemes, but then take so long to get to the quarterback. Because then, of course, receivers are just going to be wide open. They're going to be open in space. Right? I mean, the point of zone coverage is so you cover a certain part of the field. So that you can maybe trick the quarterback into thinking that there is room to throw when there isn't. But if you can't get and rush the quarterback to make that decision, the quarterback's going to be able to dissect zone defenses. And then even if Betcher did try to run man coverage, we don't have the talent to run man coverages. And the thing with man coverage is you only have about 2 to 3 good coverage seconds before the DB sort of gasses out, or before the route tree sort of progresses even more complex where the DB can't keep up anymore. And we've seen that today. We got burned by Terry McLaurin and Harmon, 2 rookie wide receivers. We got burned by rookie receiving corps guys. We are way off from where we want to be. And I'm going to be the first one to admit it. Heading into this season, during the offseason when I was I had a podcast episode where I did my expectations of this defense. I rated our secondary the most talented part of our defense. But in fact, I was so wrong. It is the least talented part of our defense. I know people are hard on Alec Ogletree. But look, we have a decent amount. We have average linebackers. Alec Ogletree is an average linebacker who's probably getting overpaid by the Giants. David Mayo, average linebacker. Ryan Connolly got hurt early in the season. Showed some really good promise. He was a rookie out of Wisconsin. He'll come back. He may show some pretty good. He may come back and have a good impact for the New York Giants. So obviously more to come. And if you want to count the linebackers that are sort of technically edge rushers in a 3-4 defense, Marcus Golden's not terrible either. He's our best pass rusher. And Lorenzo, I hope the game that Lorenzo Carter had today, if he has that every single game, then that helps this line. That helps this front four. This front seven. But we haven't gotten that. He has been pedestrian. He has been a no-show. I think our interior set, right? We have Dalvin Tomlinson. We have, obviously, Dexter Lawrence. I mean, we have even Leonard Williams now who, it's a big question mark. Are we going to re-sign him or not? I don't know what we do there. Because now, you essentially get, if you don't sign Leonard Williams, you not only lose Leonard Williams, but you lose the draft picks that you traded for him. So you're essentially your net gain is only really one draft pick, which is probably going to be a third rounder. Ideally, I would like to, sign Leonard Williams, but he did come out a couple of weeks ago saying, look, if the Giants don't give him a big money contract, he's probably going to look elsewhere. But touching back on the secondary, Dwayne Haskins was 12 for 15, 133 yards and 2 touchdowns before he got hurt, which was on a sort of low hit by Marcus Golden. Then Case Keenum comes in and has an equally good as game as Dwayne Haskins did. 16 of 22, 158 yards and 1 touchdown. So in total, this secondary gave up 3 touchdowns. Gave up a rushing touchdown to Case Keenum, which was a fumble recovery, which sort of tied the game and ended up going into overtime. Then we also ended up giving a rushing touchdown to Adrian Peterson. Now, that obviously, those two, the Adrian Peterson touchdown itself isn't the fault on the secondary, nor is the scramble by Keenum. But on those 2 drives, those were long-lasting drives in which the secondary was unable to stop guys like Terry McLaurin, Steven Sims, who I've never heard of, and I don't think Redskins fans were probably too high on Steven Sims either, but had a breakout game, 6 catches, 64 yards for 2 touchdowns. Terry McLaurin, who they also call Scary Terry, who's been phenomenal for the Washington Redskins, 7 catches for 86 yards. Kelvin Harmon, 5 receptions for 58 yards. I mean, they burned us equally in the past game as the Giants did to the Washington Redskins. This team shouldn't be able to score 35 points on anyone, and they did. And they did it on our defense. But look, I know that it's not James Bettcher's fault, and I've said this. It's the fact that we don't have enough talent. But we just need a whole new regime in here. Let's change the culture. Let's implement a new culture. Let's do it as early as we possibly can and sort of stick with it for 5 years. Stick with it through the contract of the new regime. So, for instance, if Mike McCarthy comes in, is able to hire his defensive coordinator, let's keep those guys for as long as Mike McCarthy's contract is, at least that much. You want to give Mike McCarthy a 3-year, 4-year contract, let's keep the whole staff for the duration of that contract, and let's see what happens. And then we can change coaching staffs once again. Because I also don't want to keep jumping around, hopping around between head coaches, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, where our players. Right now, we're a pretty fairly young team, and we're starting a lot of young players, a lot of rookies. I don't want our players to have to get used to a new playbook every other year, where now their production ends up taking a hit as a result of that. But, overall, look, not the greatest showing from the New York Giants defense. Again, kudos to our run defense because we stuffed Adrian Peterson and we stuffed Chris Thompson. We did as good as anybody could. Adrian Peterson had 15 carries for 36 yards. But again, that's also Adrian Peterson. That's the type of season he's had. He's an old running back. He's in his mid-30s. He's not going to burst and have 100-yard games every single week. You'll probably have one good rushing game every, 4, 5, 6 games? This offensive line's a little hurt as well. We lucked in. They don't have Darius Geis. Maybe the running game looks a little different with Darius Geis in the backfield instead of Adrian Peterson. And even with making the Washington Redskins a one-dimensional offense from a production standpoint, because think about it. Peterson had 36 carries, but they gave it to him 15 times, so they were still trying to stick to the run somewhat. They were down 2 scores, and they were still trying to run the ball. They never shied away from running the ball. We made the Washington Redskins, from a production standpoint, we forced them to beat us through the air, and they kind of did. We were lucky enough to get the first possession in overtime because we scored on that first possession in overtime. Otherwise, who knows how the game would have shaped up. Remember, we faced Philly. That Philly game went into overtime. Philly got the ball first. They ran right down the field. And they scored and won the game. The Giants didn't have a chance to combat that. Thankfully, this time around, the coin toss worked in our favor, and we got the ball first. Who knows? Who knows if Terry McLaurin burns us for another 30, 40 yards? This defense needs to improve. And we can't continue to be the same team next year. But we will end up doing that no matter who we add to this team if we keep this coaching staff. And folks, that about wraps it up. That was episode 30 of Unsportsmanlike Conduct podcast. Please make sure you subscribe and follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Peace out. It's your boy HP. Until next time.